I'm Bob Grupp. I chair StratCommWorld, which is a strategic communications conference organized each spring in Washington, D.C. Our program aims at best practices at the intersection of corporate communications, military public affairs, government relations, and advocacy by nonprofit organizations and NGOs. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Yael Hartmann. Hi, Yael.
Hi, Bob.
As she is traveling to Washington in June to present a plenary session at StratCommWorld and to network with colleagues who will be attending from around the world. So today, where are you speaking to us from, Yael?
I'm actually speaking to you from Bujumbura, Burundi, but I live in Kigali, Rwanda, which is a short distance away.
Okay. For our listeners, we know that's in Central Africa, but exactly where? I mean, where do you place those two countries in our listeners' minds?
Yeah, Rwanda is Burundi's northern neighbor. Rwanda is bordered by DRC, so Democratic Republic of Congo in the west, Uganda in the north, Tanzania in the east, and Burundi to the south. And they both lie a few degrees south of the equator, which means they don't really have seasons the way that we know it in the US. It's always about the same temperature. There are rainy seasons and non-rainy, but both are landlocked. So that's a good orientation.
So you're working in Africa for an NGO, the One Acre Fund. Tell us about One Acre Fund. Sort of what's the elevator speech about what One Acre Fund and what you're doing in Africa?
Sure. One Acre Fund is a social enterprise which tackles the problem of hunger among more than 50 million African smallholder farmers. So those smallholder farmers are the backbone of our food chain all over the world. And we apply what seem like simple solutions to a massive problem. We apply it by providing accessible, high-quality seed and fertilizer on credit. We provide training and follow-up so that the farmers are using correct planting practices. And we do this so that they can go from sometimes subsistence, which means they're barely feeding their families, to starting a business, building another room on their crowded house, sending their older children to secondary school. So the organization really sees an impact on the ground. When One Acre Fund was founded in 2006, we began with only 38 farmer families in Kenya. And in 2018, we were serving 800,000 clients in 6 countries, and we're on track to serve over 1 million by the end of this year.
1 million people. That's a huge impact.
Yeah, it is. It is daunting, and it is also extremely exciting.
What's your role in the organization at One Acre Fund?
I have a complicated role. I am the government relations lead for Burundi country program, but I also oversee communication strategy for the Rwanda government team. It's definitely a mouthful, and it seems like 2 jobs, but that's because it is 2 jobs. So I essentially help the Burundi country program align with Burundi government's priorities through partnerships, relationships, continuous communication at all levels of government. And for the Rwanda program, I've built up the brand of the organization with my team's help, of course, and I've created an advisory council, which has been very crucial to developing our 5-year, 10-year strategy. It's made up of high-profile government and private sector influences who are from Rwanda and care about the future of Rwanda. And they act as a sounding board and have given us some invaluable access to their network, as well as helping us push some really big projects forward.
So what's a typical day look like, or a typical week on the job this week or any other week? What are the highlights of your role and the work you're doing?
Yeah. Well, I start answering emails at around 6 a.m., but I don't have to do that. The work-life balance is actually really good at One Acre Fund, in theory at least. I mean, in this role, because I have 2 for now, it's been kind of hectic, but I always want to stay caught up, so I start earlier. I work with my Burundi team remotely 3 out of 4 weeks a month, which means I travel 1 week a month to Burundi on average. I have a lot of what I call check-ins with them. That's a One Acre Fund term where we really spend time going through what they're working on, the challenges they face, and how I can help them and give them advice. I meet with the Rwanda team less often, even though I'm actually in the country, but I could have any number of partnership meetings in Rwanda while I'm there with external stakeholders throughout the day at coffee shops, in their offices. Or I'm in a plane to Burundi because I go so often there. When I'm in Burundi, I'm at the office in meetings with government officials, going to our headquarters, which is in the north, 1 hour north of Bujumbura, in a beautiful town called Morambia. I would say half my day is spent thinking about and writing up strategic plans for how we make our next move in these countries. And half is about day-to-day activities. I'm asking my local government team how their field visits went with the officials. My national government team I want to know about their status on our maize import permit, things like that are really day-to-day.
Well, your background seems to have set you up perfectly for this job. You have what I consider a fascinating career background. You served in the Israeli Defense Force as a spokesperson in the United States with American Press. You've been an account supervisor at a communications agency, head of communications and branding at an investment company. Now you're at One Acre Fund, and you also teach online a graduate program for the University of Florida. Are those jobs as diverse as they seem? And can you find a common thread through those when you think about it?
I thought about this a lot, and I actually did find a common thread. I found a few, but I think one of them is strategic foresight. So it's so easy with all these different jobs to get caught up in fighting fires because they're very intense jobs. But all these jobs benefit from stepping back and asking, where do we want to be with our target audience, with government, with the public, with the media? Where do we want to be on behalf of our clients? And clients is a loose term, in a year, in 5 years. So now my clients are technically almost 500,000 farmers, which make up our Rwanda and Burundi program. But in reality, my clients are the government and the public domain where we operate. So in strategic communications, you can really determine the success or failure of a program or client portfolio or PR campaign in the military, and even how well maybe a class digests what you're teaching them, based on how well you're doing with communication. So it's a high pressure type role in all of these sectors. Another theme, maybe it would be crucial strategic partnerships, because those really help determine the success in these roles. If I partner with a New York Magazine editor and we work on a major feature article that takes us 4 months to plan, where we embed a journalist into, a certain army unit, and we then produce a very worthwhile project, an article which is worthwhile because I have a say in the narrative around how, say, the Israeli Defense Forces are portrayed to the international public, then that strategic partnership is extremely worthwhile. If I partner with a government-funded youth empowerment organization in Rwanda or Burundi or elsewhere in East Africa, and we help youth find good jobs in the agriculture sector by providing them with skills training, the experience they need when they're interning or working at One Acre Fund, that's a huge win for us. So, and so on. You get the idea, but those partnerships can be so crucial among all those sectors. So that's another thread that I found.
I think you make it an important point, and it's so easy for us to get caught up in the day-to-day, but focusing on the outcomes of what we're trying to achieve is so important to pull us to the finish line.
Agreed, very much so.
I'm curious, how did you find One Acre Fund, or did they find you?
I actually found it through a good friend from graduate school. I was at SEPA at Columbia University for a master's program, and I made a very close friend from the first day, named Jenny, and she and I were very close even after graduating, and I always followed her, and she ended up at One Acre Fund. In fact, she was one of the first cohort, just right at the beginning, working in Kenya, and she had a bunch of different roles. When it's that small, it's almost like a startup, and she really grew with the organization. And I always admired her for going and taking the plunge and living in Kenya and then living in Rwanda. And one day I was looking at their website because I was always intrigued and would go back to the website, and I saw a job that looked really appealing. I thought this job was tailor-made for me. So I applied without telling her because I was a bit chagrined about applying but I didn't want to tell her yet. And when I got an interview, I told her, and it was just really exciting because when I went there for the interview, I stayed with her, and I realized that I could do this, that I could bring my family over to Africa, and that this was the kind of experience I wanted. I wanted to be working on the ground and see the impact of my work.
Well, that's an exciting career story, and I would venture to say there's more than one listener sitting in an office somewhere, sort of secretly wishing they had the challenges that you have in such a beautiful part of the world too.
Yeah, I would encourage people to take the plunge because it's a once in a lifetime experience, and you honestly It's definitely a career development move as well.
You mentioned earlier, many mornings you'll get up early and kind of check in online. Are the digital technologies and the changes occurring and, the social media platforms, are they as robust where you're working as they are, for example, where we are in the States?
Oh yeah, I mean, you cannot underestimate the power of social media on this continent. Twitter is the way that government communicates in many of these countries. So higher income families, and individuals in government really use Twitter as their key platform. That's how they get information out. That's how you publicize jobs. It is so essential to know about Twitter and to be on Twitter and active. Instagram is a social tool, but it's great for recruitment and for donor exposure so that they know what we're doing. Facebook's another good platform. I mean, smartphone penetration is skyrocketing on the continent. So one of our countries of operation, Uganda, it's among the top 50 countries in the world with the smartphone use. It's definitely at a tipping point. Rwanda has just come up with an affordable smartphone for rural users called the Mara phone. It's completely developed and produced in Rwanda. And so they're being distributed in rural areas, and soon farmers will be doing everything from their smartphones. So they already repay the credit that we give them from their feature phones, from their simple phones, which doesn't have a touch screen, but soon they're going to all have smartphones. So it's the way of the future with every client for strategic communications.
So I assume you're using these platforms to not only publicize your work at One Acre Fund, but also to get feedback and listen to your key stakeholders. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, One Acre Fund already has a stellar reputation. It has very strong values, and that comes out in everything that we do. Truly, I mean, some organizations just say that, but I feel that One Acre Fund, upholds those so well, and their reputation precedes them. But we also promote our stories on social media platforms. Instagram, we have loads of beautiful photo content. It's just, it's a magical place to take photos. But Twitter and Facebook as well. And, when we want to find good talent, we look on social media. I've launched both the Rwanda and Burundi specific Twitter platforms since I've been in these roles, because the governments in both countries communicate on that platform. But we're active on LinkedIn, and so is our staff. And our CEO gave a TED Talk a while back, so that's another great platform, obviously, for getting out our business model so that people really have a fluency in what we do. And we also employ thousands of employees across our programs. That's a really good way to get the word out.
I mentioned earlier that you're teaching an online graduate course, a master's degree course in global strategic communications for the University of Florida. What advice would you give to a recent college graduate, or for that matter, a mid-career professional wanting to get into this area, an area of enormous social impact, positive impact? I mean, what advice would you give them? And, what skills do you think are most in demand in your area of work?
I think that one piece of advice would be that you should apply for jobs that don't necessarily exactly fit with your CV or your background. You can be, if you're creative and innovative, if you can appeal with the passion that you have for that specific role, you should go for it. And you should really express yourself in the cover letter. In the first paragraph, you should really be talking about why you care about that job, especially for social enterprise and nonprofit. They care about you being passionate. That's one very important skill to have. It's not a skill, but it's a quality. You should have good negotiation skills, because it can be tough in this environment. Team building is so important. If you're good at team building, that can be a big asset, because, in an environment like this, you have to have a strong team, and you can't rely on one person. Your media outreach skills are very helpful. You need nuancing and diplomacy with media outreach and with everything else that you do. You have to, relationship building is so key. So your networking skills are very important. The environment here is constantly evolving, and you have to be able to pivot quickly. So change, you have to be very good at change. But those are some of the skills. And your branding skills, if you know how to brand an organization quickly and efficiently, and while still remaining true to the organization's values, and if you can express that in your cover letter, you're golden. You have a great way of catching the eye of the recruiter.
Well, we're really looking forward to meeting you at StratCom World on June 1st and 2nd at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And, we'll hear, I'm sure, more depth on all the subjects you've touched on. But what can delegates who are going to attend StratCom World in June expect to take away from spending time with you in Washington?
I think they would learn a few things. I mean, they might take away that strategic communications about predicting the future. It's about understanding, that if you can predict what future policies, strategies, and plans are coming up in your country of operation and try to prepare for that vision, then you're in a good place. So that's one of the things I try to do. I think they would learn that project management is your best friend. Staying organized can be so difficult when you have so many balls in the air. And they would learn that in this kind of job, you have a million priorities and all of them are just as important as the other. They would learn that I try to know my client and you should get into the field. If you're in this sphere, you need to know your client well. So not only will it motivate you to be good at your job, but it makes you a better advocate. So they would know that I love to go into the field. And I think they would learn to speak to their target audience through social media, right? Seems obvious, but on this continent, anything from WhatsApp to SMS can be key in speaking to your target audience. So they would know how much I care about social media interaction and learning about the social media environment in the country that you operate in, because that's really important to know your environment.
That's terrific. I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Yael. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you, Bob. I look forward to the conference.
Yael Hartmann speaking to us today from Burundi in Africa, where she works at One Acre Fund. Please check out the conference online at our website, www.stratcom.world. We hope to see you there June 1st and 2nd in Washington, D.C. I'm Bob Grupp. Thanks for joining us.